All right, so I'm very excited for today's build because I believe it is my first Handwired build of 2026, unless I did the Scotto Handwired edition back in the beginning of this year. I don't remember if it was in December or January, so I'm just calling this my first Handwired of 2026. And also I've kind of been slacking because Bambu sent me the H2D that I printed this whole keyboard on back in like December, and I told him I'd do a video, so I'm kind of doing that now and kind of push it to its limits for this video. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna jump to the overhead and we're just gonna get started building it. So this here is the Scotto 55, which you can tell with the little S55 in the middle, but it actually has 56 buttons on it because I didn't count the encoder, because you can kind of press that and get another button press, but it has 55 keys in particular, and it is this nice sandwich design. Now the reason I did the sandwich design there actually is if we look on this section over here and this section here, which first I mentioned too, this was printed on my H2D, and look how nice the multicolor just kind of printed. It looks really, really nice. I actually made this a little bit thicker this time too, because by doing that, you allow it to get more vibrant, because there's 0.8 millimeters instead of normally I do 0.4 on flat. But this was printed on my H2D. It looks really, really nice. And the reason for the kind of sandwich design here is that this section here is blank, and then this one over here, if we didn't do that sandwich design and just did like a tray mount, this would kind of be cut out and it wouldn't look that great. So just having that makes it kind of give real nice clear separation between the segments. But this is the top plate here, and if I actually flip this over, you can see how we're going to screw it together is with these little heat set inserts. I did these off camera as I normally do. And then we also have a bunch of additional holes that I actually left here, because this is kind of the prototype before the files that I actually released in the repo, which if you're not aware, the files for this are available for free if you want to build one, so link down below for that. But I did remove a lot of the hardware on here where I had these additional ones, because my fear was that this plate here would kind of press in too much. I found out after printing it that that's really not the case. It's actually very sturdy here. This is a 3mm plate there, and of course I'm using underneath these little recessed sections to kind of have my switches clip in nicely. But also on here you can see there's a lot more hardware kind of in between, which yet again, that's something that I figured out I don't need. So if we look at the bottom here and flip it over, we have all these screws in the middle, which I'm also not going to use because, well, it's like 25 additional pieces of hardware and I didn't really need that. So we're just not going to mount any of that. We're just going to use the edge pieces here. Now, the other thing on this that's really cool that I like doing on keyboards now is if I actually assemble this, I've been doing this quite often, especially if you're in like my Discord or anything, you'll see I post about this a lot. But if we look on the edge here, it has this fuzzy skin, which kind of just makes it look really nice. It kind of really hides the layer lines and it just looks really clean. I like how it comes out. But what I'm gonna do is put this down, and then I'm gonna grab the switches, which are on the floor over here. These are some Akko Cilantro, if I flip them up right way. They're a kind of light tactile. I believe the actuation is like 2mm on this. Yeah, pre-travel 2mm. I'm kind of happy to use those, and Akko did send these to me like months ago. I have a stack over there off camera of like Akko switches I really have to kind of get through. But I'm gonna take these, I'm gonna go through and pop those into the keyboard now. So there they all are in the board, and you probably saw throughout that time lapse that I actually was taking this a lot, kind of flipping it over and doing stuff like this, because I think I mentioned is that these switches were actually kind of pre-production, so they didn't have the greatest tolerances on them, and you can kind of see that if I grab one here, and it just kind of pulls right down. It doesn't really have much grip on the actual plate. Now, there are a few ways you can actually deal with that, and the first one would be that if you actually just glued them in, you could just put a piece of glue on here and just kind of hold them in like that. You could, of course, modify your plate file, which I don't recommend typically doing if there's an issue somewhere. You don't want it to be the actual plate being a little tighter here. But the biggest one that's actually going to solve this issue, if I put this down and grab it over here, so we have all my pre-cut copper wire for the columns there, and basically once we start soldering this all together, specifically this is 16 gauge. This is why I like using the 16 gauge wire, is that it's a lot more sturdy. It leaves a lot more rigidity to the board. So when we start actually soldering this together, it's going to kind of hold everything in place. So that's not going to really be an issue that, you know, I can kind of just tap them out. It's not going to be the biggest deal because that's going to hold it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through and solder up the columns now. So there are all the columns wired up. If we actually look really close here, you can kind of see how that is. And this did fix the issue I was mentioning before, where if we actually just kind of push this out, you can see they're all kind of tied together. And then also, if I do a little shake like that, you can hear that there is no more rattling. So everything's held nice and secure in by that 16 gauge copper wire. And then what we're going to talk about now are the rows, because what I actually did is I prepared off camera again these just kind of pre-cut pieces of 16 gauge copper wire that has a nice little bend in it that will perfectly align with the switches here to get the diodes wired to it. Now, of course, I do have my diodes off camera right here. These are my pre-coiled diodes, which I did use my diode coiling tool, which I will link down below if you want to build one yourself, or you can also purchase one in my shop. But right here are the little diodes, which are all nice and pre-coiled, which it really just helps kind of hold it on the switch. It's just a little more secure than like tack welding it on. But basically we'll put those on there, wire those to these little row pieces of wire here. And then after we talk about the wiring, which we're actually going to be using on this one, a RP2040 Pro Micro. I really like these controllers because they have 16 megs of flash. So basically you can do like anything you want on them. And it is an RP2040, which is a, modern RP2040, which is the controller I always recommend. But I'm just going to put that down here. I'm going to grab these pieces of copper and I'm going to go through now and do the diodes for the rows. So there is the entire matrix all wired up, and if we actually take a closer look here, you can see that we have our little diode going into our row here, and then we have our marine heat shrink, and basically all marine heat shrink is heat shrink with a little hot glue. So what it really does is just kind of holds it in place there a little bit better, but we have all that wired up on there. And then also in the middle, I want to point out that our encoder has a diode on it also on these two legs over here. Now the reason for that is if we actually flip this over now, this is its own switch technically. So this is actually a column on its own. It's wired into row 3 here, and this will allow us to kind of get a function on that when we press it. So that's just kind of how I'm doing that. So I just wanted to quickly pause the video for a second and kind of explain a little bit about EC11 encoders, because I want to be able to reference back to this if someone asks me about it again. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually just draw an EC11 encoder here really quick. So we have our encoder, of course, and we have our 2 pins, and then our 3 bottom pins here. Now, the first thing that I just kind of explained in the video is that if we look at these 2 top pins here, all those are is a simple switch. It's no different than really an MX switch. So really you don't have to think too much there. You basically pop a diode on one of these, put it in your matrix, works just as you expect. But what people get confused about with encoders is actually these 3 bottom switches here. Now, really, they aren't complicated. Really, all we have is we have this middle one here, which will go to the ground pin on your controller. And then we have this right one here and this left one. These are what determine the counterclockwise and the clockwise actuations of what will happen with the encoder when you actually rotate it. All these will do is we'll have this one say go to GP1, and then this one will say go to GP2. Now you can configure this in firmware later if you get them mixed up, because sometimes you'll put one on the incorrect pin and you'll turn it clockwise, but it'll actually run the counterclockwise function. Really easy to change that in firmware. But that's the general idea of what you would be able to do with an encoder. It's really only 5 pins. It's the 2 for the switch, and then the 3 for the actual rotation of the encoder. And it's pretty simple to understand. So what I want to do now actually is jump over to my computer and kind of show you a little bit of the firmware, kind of a high level, so you get an idea of what that's like, because they're very configurable. The wiring isn't too crucial on it, as long as you understand that we have 1 pin for right, 1 pin for left. We have our ground pin here, and then these up top are the switch. So let's jump over to the computer and kind of take a look at the firmware side of things. Here I am on my bed, just sitting with my very tired boy here who's just completely snoozing. And we're gonna just go into the Scotto 55 folder here, down to keyboard.json. And basically all you have to know in order to configure your encoder is we have these 3 lines, which are basically just determining which pins the actual encoder will use to do the rotation for the counterclockwise and the clockwise. And this is what I was mentioning earlier, if I actually go over, is that we have pin A, and then we also have pin B. So if you go to turn your encoder later on and you find out that it's not actually matching what you want in your firmware, basically you just flip these. So I could change this one to GP9, and then this one over here I can change to GP8 if it wasn't correct. So that's the first thing you need to know, is how to actually set up the rotation pins. The other thing is, if I actually go down here, we have our keyboard matrix down below. I believe it is on this one right here. So if I go down, this is the actual switch pin that I'm using for, so I'm just wiring into my matrix as usual. But basically on this one, we have an extra key on the matrix in order to do that press for the actual switch. So if I actually go over to my key map here, so I'll go to my Scotto key map, I'll go to keymap.c, what you'll see in here is that we have this additional KC mute here, which is basically that center button in the keyboard.json definition. Now the final thing in here that I want to actually show you is if we actually go over to features. Yet again, this is kind of a high level thing. I'm not really telling you exactly how to do this, but I basically have a features folder here where I have encoder.c. There are many ways to kind of set this stuff up. We're going to jump into this file, and what you'll see in here is that this is actually grayed out because I don't have this compiled right now. This is just my NVIM setup. It has some weird stuff. The only lines you need to be aware of in here are these right here. Now the if defined here is kind of best practice to only enable this code if it is defined, which we'll talk about in a second. We have this little kind of definition here that we're saying on layers 0 through 4 here. So 1 through 5, because stuff in code is 0 index, so it starts at 0. 0 is technically 1. But basically for the first 5 layers, we're using this encoder counterclockwise, clockwise function, and then we have on counterclockwise, we want volume down, and then on clockwise, we want volume up. So pretty simple to understand there, but that's basically all there is to really enable an encoder, other than the last thing, which is actually enabling this. So if we jump over to our thing over here, we go to rules.mk, we will see that we have our encoder enable here, and then we also have encoder map enable. Now what encoder map enable actually does is it will allow you to define different encoder mappings for different layers. So if we jump yet again back over to encoder.c, what I'm doing right now with this is just to see things 0 through 4. Basically, it's just saying do the same thing for all of them. But in theory, what you could do is actually copy this, and you could change this to like 1 here. So we could put 1. It's a little more complicated than that, but basically you could say for different layers to do different things. But that's really all there is to an encoder, a very high level thing. I would recommend, if you have questions on this, to join my Discord, because I can kind of help people out in there, and other people will be able to help with this. But it's fairly simple, especially if you know QMK, this should be simple enough to understand. But with that, I just wanted to kind of give a high level of kind of how an encoder works and how it works in firmware, so I can kind of reference back to it when people have questions on this eventually. So back to the video. What I'm gonna do is grab this. I'm gonna grab this here. I'm gonna go through and wire everything up, and then we can flash the firmware, and we should have a functioning board. So there is everything wired to the controller there. You can see we have a bunch of wires running there. We have our encoder all wired up. I tested the firmware on this. It is functional. So all I have to do at this point is I'm going to actually put this down. I'm going to grab over here the bottom half of the case, and then of course the top half of the case, which yet again, I just want to point out how nice that came out on the Bambu printer. Just the kind of vibrancy of it and the fuzzy skin on the edge there, if you can kind of see that. It looks really nice. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to kind of sandwich everything in here. And I'm also going to use, if I can just grab it over here real quick, I have some what is called UV resin here, and this is what I'm going to use to kind of hold the controller in place. It just cures with the little UV light. So I'm going to go through, do all that now, and then after we'll be able to do a typing test after we do the keycaps, because the keycaps are also pretty cool for this. So I'm going to just go ahead and take this UV resin, and I'm going to glue it into the case. So there's the board all assembled in the case, and you probably saw throughout that time lapse that I had a really hard time kind of getting a screwdriver in here. It kept getting stuck. I might mess with the file and make that a little bit better for like a future revision, or if you decide to build this yourself. If not, all you're gonna have to do is just use like a little Allen key and kind of dig up your finger, because that's kind of what I did here, is tore up my finger using this thing, but it did work. Just not the best thing in the world. But at this point, what I want to do is actually flip this around. We're going to put this down on the desk here, and I'm going to grab a baggie over here, which of course has all my keycaps, and then the little knob here, which I did design. It is on the case file for this. I'll basically just snap onto this like so. You can see that we have a button. This can rotate. That's pretty good right there. Very short and kind of low profile. But the thing that's going to tie this all together is actually the rest of these here, which are of course the keycaps. Now I did print these in a little bit of a different color than the actual case. So if I actually grab one of these here and kind of show you, this case is just Elegoo PLA black, and then this is actually Bambu metal PLA. So there's a slight, ever so subtle difference between them in terms of color. It kind of looks a little bit nice because it's kind of more reflective on the keycaps, but also you can see just how nice these came out printed yet again on the H2D back there, which I don't know if I mentioned kind of how I came to get that. Is that Bambu sent me printers before in the past, so they kind of, this is like the sponsored segment, even though this isn't technically sponsored. They didn't even know I was making a video, really. I didn't really do anything for that. The printers behind me, I actually bought a P1S myself before, so like I liked Bambu, and then I've kind of got a partnership with them in the past like year with a semi-printer. So basically back in December, I reached out and said, hey, could you send me an H2C, because I wanted to check that out. And they recommended the H2D actually because the 2 nozzles would be way better for what I do, where most of the stuff is kind of just dual color. Basically, I have no waste material with these. I'll try to put some B-roll over here, but like the waste was like a couple grams, so very easy to kind of get some very high quality keycaps with very minimal waste. I think it took about 11 hours to print all 60 or so keycaps, because I do print them at 0.12 layer height, so they kind of sit on the plate like that and then build up. That's how I'm able to do that without any support material, and they look really, really nice there. But what I'm going to do now, of course, I'm just going to take these keycaps, I'm going to go through and pop them on the board, and then we will talk a little bit more about it probably, and then we can do a typing test, because I'm getting really excited. I kind of like these Akko Cilantro, so I'm looking forward to how those sound. So I'm going to go through and pop the keycaps on now. I'm running out of breath, so yeah. So So there's the fully assembled board right there. I think it looks really, really nice. I'm honestly really happy with how this turned out. But if we look at the side, yet again, I do have that textured fuzzy skin there. It looks great. The keycaps look really nice. And they do actually, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but they do have the textured skin on them also, or the fuzzy skin on them, which I've actually found that you would think it would make them feel a little bit fuzzy or textured, right? But actually what it does is it kind of hides the layer lines in a weird way where it actually feels smoother with the texture. It's 0.1 and 0.1 on the settings. I'll pop that up so if anyone wants to kind of copy that, but it looks really nice. And another thing also that I want to kind of mention is that in Bambu Studio, it has a feature where you can actually paint the fuzzy skin on, which is really helpful with stuff like this, where I can basically just target the outer edge, which other slicers don't let me do, but it looks really, really nice. I'm really happy that it came out. I kind of like how it sounds too and feels. What we have to do now, of course, is a typing test. So we're going to jump over to Monkey Type. We're going to do typing test on it. We're going to see how fast I can actually type on this, because I have been using 16:16 space chalk switches for the past like month or two. So going back to normal MX spacing, we'll see how that works, but let's jump over to Monkey Type and give it a typing test. So yeah, I think it sounds and feels really nice to type on. I actually like those Akko Cilantro switches, even though they kind of had that pre-production issue, which, you know, really can't fault Akko for that. They are pre-production. But if we look at this as a final look here, it looks really, really nice. I love the kind of really vibrant look of the multicolor here, especially if we look at the side with the Elegoo yellow and Elegoo black here is kind of pairing really nicely, and then the metal bamboo filament here with the color on them and the texture, just it looks really, really good. I'm happy with how this turned out. Also, another big shout out to Bambu for sending me the H2D back there. I've been loving that printer, honestly. Like, it's been fantastic for printing keycaps and boards like this, especially this one, since it's a little bit bigger than what would fit on a normal 256 like a P1S. So I kind of had it like that on the build plate to kind of use the full potential of the printer to really push it to what I wanted to try here, and it worked fantastic. So thanks Bambu for sending me that. But with that, I really like how this board turned out. In the description below, there will be a link to my Discord if you want to join there and ask me some questions and stuff like that. And also all the files for this will be available on my repo. So if you want to download it, print it yourself, and build it yourself, the firmware, all the case files, stuff like that will be available if you want to do that. But other than that, I don't have anything else to say here other than thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.